For me, when there are waves and waves of unrest that is taking place within me, what has been vital is to find that quiet space, to be attentive of my right here, right now presence.
I have been, trying to do the thing of just being mindful of my own breath and using that as a way of calming myself. Yeah, I appreciate the whole thing of being quiet, and it's a form of prayer, I think.
I have a chronic condition that affects my heart and lungs, and I just have learned how to live with it, but the hurt is just fear that this will that I will die from this sooner than people my age. I keep going back to that experience at the temple because you spend 2 weeks. So you do the Zazen practice for 30 minutes in the morning, and then you do it at night for an hour. The bulk of it is being in silence together. But I feel like that first day was silent, and I started crying. I felt like I can just tend to this and meet God here with me in this pain, and it doesn't have to be so in the background all the time.
The moments that we can spend time in real, actual connection kind of can heal some of those moments where we won't talk about something. When we go to junior senior Bible camp and you don't really know the people, but you're forced to talk about these big topics and they might be really personal, and you still find that people will open up to you, and even though you've only known them for a short amount of time. And something that's also interesting about that is we don't have service up there, so that might contribute to it. But
paralleled, as I grew up, the invasion or inclusion of television, radio first and then television. You just try to include it in your life that made sense. Now, when we became Adventists, then you spend less time with TV and more time at church-related activities and things like that.
I remember when I went through some really challenging times, talking to a friend that was facing cancer, and he didn't have a lot more life expectancy. And he told me, I have come to a point in which I'm okay with what's happening to me, and I just want to make the most out of the time that I'm living. And I thought, I think we should do that every single day.
As I look over my life, it was hope that helped me get through everything that I've gone through. And without hope, you have nothing. God has given me hope.
We can train our brain to dwell on the good, on the joy, on who God is. We can train our brain, and it's never too late. There's neuroplasticity, so there's hope. Even for old people like me, there's hope.
I want to thank our media crew for the videos they are creating for camp meeting, reaching out here in our church community and also beyond our walls and to others to get a sense of where different ones are with some of the issues we're talking about. So I'm told that I have an organ inside my chest that I've never seen called the heart. I'm told that it's there. I can't assess the health of it. Told that you all have it as well, and that since under normal circumstances it is not able to be viewed by the naked human eye, that other methods have to be developed. So scientists have been at work over the decades developing other ways to assess the health of this organ we can't see. EKGs and stress tests and blood tests and MRIs and angiograms, and the list could go on. I'm out of my depth very quickly when it comes to that. But I'm told, I read that all of those can help assess the health of this heart that apparently pounds within my chest and yours. I haven't seen it. But there's another heart that I also haven't seen that's also extremely important, whose health we also need to assess. That's the heart Scripture talks about. It's a heart that it's translated, it's interpreted in various different ways. It can be interpreted as the inner core, the self, who we are, our soul, the inner person. It can be interpreted as our mind, or a makeup of all of those together. It's the essence of who we are at the core. We can't see it. I haven't seen it. You haven't. So how do we assess how healthy it is? I want to suggest to you this morning that what rises up out of the heart and becomes visible in the life can tell us about the health of our heart. But first, the story. 1997, 20 miles off Cornwall, England, the ocean liner Tokyo Express is traveling. It's one of those huge cargo ships filled with those immense shipping containers, traveling along, and is suddenly hit by a rogue wave. Rogue waves are unexpected, large waves that are at least twice or more larger than any other wave around them. And suddenly a rogue wave smashes into the Tokyo Express, knocking 62 of those containers off the ship and into the depths of the ocean. They plummet. 62 of them. Now, it just so happens that inside of a certain number of those containers were almost 5 million Lego pieces. Almost 5 million. And in an ironic twist of fate, these Lego pieces were nautically themed. You know, like flippers and masks and a scuba tank and seahorses and octopuses. In fact, when I read the piece, I thought they got it wrong. Octopuses is not the plural of octopus. Octopi is the plural of octopuses. So I asked my AI app, and it said I was wrong. You can't trust AI. So anyway, all these things go into the ocean in all these shipping containers. Very soon after, Legos begin to make their appearance on the beach. On the beach there, on other beaches all around. In fact, beaches everywhere, but especially the beach near the place where these containers got knocked off into the ocean. They got so many Legos, it became known as Lego Beach. It gave scientists actually the opportunity to study some things, plastics in the ocean currents. So there's a U.S. oceanographer by the name of Curtis Ebsmeyer who said this about that incident. The most profound lesson I've learned from the Lego story is that things that go to the bottom of the sea don't always stay there. They can be carried around the world seemingly randomly, but subject to the planet's currents and tides. The incident, listen to this, the incident is a perfect example of how even when inside a steel container, sunken items don't stay sunken. Even inside a steel container, sunken items don't stay sunken. That actually may help us. Because maybe that's true in our lives, in this heart, as the Bible speaks of it, as well. That what is inside of there will sooner or later make its evidence, its presence known. And the presence of whatever that is can help us to determine whether or not our heart is healthy. But it requires our attention. May I have your attention, please, is what the Legos of our soul are saying. May I have your attention so that you look at this in order to do something about it. So we go to Proverbs 4 this morning. Proverbs 4, the old wise man in this case is speaking to a son, but honestly, it could be any parent to any child. It is one of those deep and slow conversations that you have with your children as they get older, as they're about to launch into life. It can't be rushed. It needs to be slow. It can't be superficial. It needs to be deep, but it requires their attention and yours if it's truly going to happen. And so here we have a parent sitting down with a child asking, may I have your attention, please? Proverbs 4, starting with verse 20. My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words. That first verse of the section is that invitation. It's that call. In fact, you heard it. Words 3 and 4. First two words, my child, and then the next two words, pay attention. My child, pay attention to what I say. You can sense the urgency in the parent's voice. Listen carefully to my words. Why are these words so important? What is this parent hoping these words will do in the life of the child? It continues in verse 21. Don't lose sight of them. That is my words. Don't lose sight of my words. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. So what the parent is saying is, child, the words I'm about to speak to you, what I'm about to share with you, if you heed it, if you hear it and heed it, if you live it, it will make a difference in your life. You will live a healthier life, a more whole life, a more healed life. No wonder the parent wants the attention. And then comes the key verse of the piece. It's verse 23. This is truly what the wise man is aiming at. I want to read you the words of Old Testament scholar Tremper Longman before we read those words. Longman says this, the heart is one's innermost being, one's core personality. The father, that is the wise man, is not interested in just a superficial response from his son, some kind of behavior modification. He desires that his child will be wise at the very core. Actions and speech will flow from a wise character. If he takes the message to heart, then that will lead to life and wholeness. So with that background, please listen to me. Pay attention. It'll make a difference in your life. This, then, is what the parent says. Verse 23. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Two phrases, two sentences in that verse. Guard your heart above all else. In fact, the NIV, in an attempt to prioritize just how important this is, actually switches those two segments of that first sentence. And it says, above all else, guard your heart. But whichever way you read it, it's very clear that the attempt is to say, what I'm sharing with you is of utmost importance. So beyond anything else, above anything else, guard your heart. That inner person, that core, that self, that soul within you, guard it. Now, what does the parent mean? What does that mean to guard your heart? The word literally has to do with keeping and protecting. What does that mean? Is he saying, be careful, guard the input that goes into your heart, into your inner person, into your inner self? Because I love French fries, but probably not so good in the blue zone. Not for your soul either. Is that what he's saying? Guard what goes in, because whoever has your ears and your eyes has your heart. Is that what he's saying? Guard the input? Possibly. Or maybe he's saying, be careful where your thoughts linger. We all have places where we linger when we need to rest, when we need to be comforted, when we're going to sleep at night, our last thoughts of the night. When we sit down after a long day of work to just chill out, he's saying, be careful where your thoughts linger. Because your thoughts can linger on healthy and good things or on not so healthy and perverse things. Is that what he's saying? Maybe even he's saying, be careful to live in reality and not in fantasy. Now, when we hear fantasy, for many, that goes immediately in a sexual direction. And that's true. That's fair. There's a temptation to fondle the thoughts rather than release them. But that's far from the only way to live in the fantasy world. What about those revenge fantasies? When you think about that person who said that mean thing, who texted that mean thing, who posted that thing that hurt you so deeply, and you get to think about that, I'd like to, yeah, and then I would, and then I'm going to, He says, careful, guard your heart. Don't live in that place. Be careful. Or what about fantasies where you are the hero of every story? Yes, it's me. I saved the world. Guard your heart. Maybe he's saying all of those and more. But what we can be certain of is that this core person we are is worth attention and care. So that's the first line, verse 23, guard your heart above all else. And then the second line, we'll read the text again, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. I like the way the Amplified Bible renders this verse, keep and guard your heart with all vigilance and above all that you guard. And then that second phrase, for out of it flow the springs of life. Many years later, a rabbi from Nazareth would say something very much like that in Luke's Gospel, the 6th chapter. A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Think of that line. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Is that not what the wise man is saying? He's saying, if you don't guard your heart, it's going to be full of things that you're going to be embarrassed to have come out. If you do guard your heart, when it issues forth in the springs of life, it will bring you health and healing. So that's the principle he lays out. Now he will shift gears at this point to go on to the next 4 verses that fill out the section. He'll shift gears onto what are the basic actions of life. He gives instructions about how we are to live out of a healthy heart. Notice what he says in verse 24 and following. Avoid all perverse talk. Stay away from corrupt speech. Look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked. Keep your feet from following evil. So what he does here is he gives instructions on how to live out of a guarded heart. But I want to suggest that there's something else contained within that, not just instructions, but underneath it, information. Because the core of what he's saying is, whatever's in your heart will issue forth in the life. It will come up. Remember, sunken things, even in steel containers, don't stay sunken. They come to the surface. Same is true with our heart. So what we see, what we say, where we go, what we do, which are the basic actions of those final verses, all of that will give us information on whether our heart is healthy or not. So this morning, an inventory. Only 2 areas. It's a simple but not easy inventory. I want to ask if you would consider some questions about your life with others, and secondly, your life with yourself. Ask some questions about both of these, the answers of which come out of your heart will tell you something about your heart health in both of these domains. Those are realities to which you need to pay attention. So we start with others. Ask yourself, what is the texture, the climate of my relationship with others? Include your marriage, your family, your kids, your siblings, neighbors, friends, roommates, fellow students, people you work with. The ripples can stretch further and further out into the pond. What is the texture? What is the nature, the flavor of those relationships? Are they relationships where you are able to talk openly? Where when issues arise, you can deal with them clearly and honestly but kindly? Can you keep your emotional issues up to date? Do you have a number of friends with whom you're able to be open and truly do life together? Or on the other hand, are the relationships you have largely distant, too often hostile, characterized by a lot of conflict, an inability to deal with issues when they come up, an inability to truly listen to and hear each other, conflicted, head-to-head, combative? What is the texture, what is the nature of your relational life? And who is largely responsible for that texture? You or all of them? Heard a story just this last week. Little Tyke in the back seat. Mom's driving. Little Tyke says, "Mommy, why do all the idiots come out only when Daddy drives?" Just to be clear, I have no little Tykes, and that was not me being asked, so, or Anita. What's the texture of your relationships? Young couple having conflict, bam, bam, head banging, they can't get through it. They're trying to find a place of commonality. Can we find a truce? And finally, just out of desperation, he says to her, "Look, if I admit I'm wrong, will you state that I'm right?" So, okay, fine. He says, "Okay, I'm wrong." She says, "You're right." Not sure that's what he was shooting for, but what is the texture? What is the quality of your relationship with others? Back when I was working toward marriage and family therapy license, I had a supervisor who said to me something one day that I've continued to ponder over the years. Thought of it in my own life. I've thought of it in counseling settings, pastoral settings. Here's what he said to me. He said, life, and I would add the words, and God, life and God have a way of bringing us back time and again to the unfinished parts of ourselves. Life and God have a way of bringing us back again and again to the unfinished parts of ourselves. So, for example, if I happen to struggle with patience and impatience, in other words, I'm an impatient person, that's an unfinished part of myself, guaranteed on most days, I will come around to that again and again, that unfinished part of myself. It's the drivers, it's the government, it's the post office clerk, it's the neighbor, it's the boss, and it just keeps bringing me around and around to that. And all these Legos keep coming up on the beach, and I want to keep saying, not my problem, not my issue. It's the rest of the world, not me. Bring us around again and again to those unfinished parts of ourselves, asking us, may I have your attention, please? There's something here you need to address. I was asked a little while ago by somebody, how does a person know, a person who's been through a divorce, how does that person know when it's okay to move into a new relationship, get married? Now, there are a lot of questions and issues to talk about there. I want to raise just one. Just one. So maybe they come to me and say, I went through this divorce, horrible, ugly, nasty, bad person, blah, blah, blah. But I'm thinking about getting involved with this person. I think it could get serious. What do you think? How do I know I'm ready? I would have one question at that point, and it would simply be this. Can you tell me, in your divorce, as painful and ugly as it was, can you tell me, what did you contribute to the failure of that marriage? What was your part in it? Person who says, you don't know my ex-spouse. I mean, she was, he was, and off they go. I may not say it this directly, but I'm thinking, you're nowhere near ready. Because all those things you had, you get married, it's still you. You can change the scenery, change your address, change your job, change your spouse, and until you address those Legos on the beach that are coming up telling you this is the condition of your heart, you'll keep facing it. In fact, Andy Stanley, some of you may have heard or read this. Andy Stanley, pastor and preacher, says, I've tried something in the counseling settings. It hadn't worked all that well, but I've tried it. Said, so somebody comes in and they're going off on their spouse. My husband is this and that and the other, and he's not Satan, but he's related to him and all, just going off about their spouse. So I take out a piece of paper, and a big piece of paper, and I draw a circle on it. Draw a big circle on it. Then I say to them, okay, this circle represents the blame for what is happening in your marriage. 100% of the blame lies inside of this circle. Now, what I'd like you to do is to draw a piece of the pie that represents your part in it. That's not what I came here for. Well, just draw a piece of the pie. Well, I don't eat big pieces of pie, so, just a little piece of pie. I said, okay, so that's not very big, but that's your responsibility. So now, since he's not here, the person who needs to change most apparently is not even in the room, so he's not here, we're going to talk just about this piece of the pie. And he says, they can't do it. Can't stay there. Because we don't want to pay attention to what's coming up from those sunken places that we need to address. Just remember this. Everybody causes joy. Some when they come and some when they go. If the people in your world would say, you're one of the second, you cause a lot of joy when you go, it's time to pay attention. Don't be the person who prayed the prayer I read about recently who said, Lord, I'm praying for patience. Because if you give me strength, I'm going to need some bail money to go along with it. Don't be that person. So make the decision. Am I willing to pay attention to what's coming up in my relationships with others? That's how we attend to the health of our heart. But then what about this piece? Ourselves, our relationships with our own selves, our own lives. That's what was in the video. People talking about, is there an ability in my life to live undistracted at times? To not constantly having to be filling the space, the silence, or my visual space with something else just so I don't have to think about what's going on in here. How's your health there? Do you have a regular time when you're quiet, listening to God, praying, reading? Do you have a time when you can sit, even in public, and observe what's around you? Pay attention to the world. Or, on the other hand, does your life tend to get filled constantly with distractions and noise? So you know it. There is one major global distraction in our time. John Mark Comer writes about that in a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. He starts this piece by quoting a New York Times op-ed, but then he comments on it. So he starts by saying, as Tony Schwartz said in his opinion piece for the New York Times, and then he quotes that, addiction is the relentless pull to a substance or an activity that becomes so compulsive it ultimately interferes with everyday life. By that definition, says Schwartz, nearly everyone I know is addicted in some measure to the internet. And then Comer's words, everyone. If you think you're the exception to the rule, great. Prove it. How? Turn off your phone for 24 hours straight. Just one day. Call it a digital Sabbath. See if you can make it that long without giving into the itch to pick your phone back up, or without writhing on the floor in a cold sweat with your teeth chattering for neurobiological withdrawal. And I want to say, what'd you have to go and get personal for? I like your writing. I thought we were friends. What do you mean I may have a problem? I think you're the one with the problem. Right? So he says, you say, no, I'm not addicted. It's not an issue for me. So Comer says, okay, that's fine. Prove it. Set it down. Go about your day. And then we start to get twitchy. Then we start to get edgy. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because we've become so accustomed to living distracted lives. So I got a text this last week. It's a rather long text from a friend, Johnny Vitorovich, who lives back east. Some of you will remember Johnny from last year. He participated in our camp meeting last year. So he sent me a text this week. I asked for permission to share it with you. I'm going to read it to you. Hey, Randy, I had to share this story with you after listening to your message from last Sabbath. I couldn't help but think of a recent experience I had at Tyson's Corner Center, Washington's largest and most popular shopping mall. Something had gotten wedged into my iPhone's charging port that I couldn't dislodge, so I made a Genius Bar appointment at Tyson's Apple store. I figured they'd have some proprietary tool I didn't own, and in a minute or two, I'd be on my merry way. When the Apple Genius, which is what they call their associates, said, "Come back in an hour and a half. We may have to take your phone apart." My first thought was, what in the world am I going to do without my phone for all that time? It was almost like losing an appendage. I wandered out of the store and into the mall, aimless and adrift. My right hand continually and involuntarily twitched, reaching into an empty pocket, as if repeating the mere motion would conjure up the missing phone. As I made my way to the far end of Tyson's toward Barnes & Noble, my go-to for killing time in a mall, I became keenly aware that I was all alone in this highly trafficked shopping center. Everyone else around me was holding a smartphone while walking, their heads bobbing up and down in a strange asynchronous rhythm. There was little to no eye contact with anyone else, even those in small groups. It felt like a scene from a sci-fi movie. I suddenly felt in the moment, focused, present, not distracted. Dare I say, I felt liberated. It was like I just had cataract surgery, not from my eyes, but for all my deluded senses. I became acutely aware of details in the mall I'd never noticed before. Did they redo the lighting in here? Is that a new anchor store? When did they add that restaurant? I had meaningful conversations with sales associates in stores I'd never even noticed. I didn't sense they were trying to sell me anything. Rather, they seemed genuinely interested and a bit lonely. They could work a whole shift without a conversation with anyone. We got to know each other's names. When does that ever happen? Much to my surprise, I thoroughly enjoyed my distraction-free journey through the mall. I never even made it to Barnes & Noble, and I hardly noticed. I even prayer walked my way through the mall without fighting the urge to peek at phantom vibrations in my pocket, the ones that typically signal a missed call or an urgent Slack message. As I made my way back to the Apple store, a small part of me was dreading the zombie-like state I knew I'd be falling back into. When I got home, I told Susan that if you'd asked me that day whether I'd choose a pre-iPhone world or the present one, I honestly would have answered pre. But the reality is, we don't have a choice. And I have to learn the discipline of carving out distraction-free moments to spend meaningful time with Christ, focused and in the moment, making metaphorical eye contact with Him daily, not because He is lonely, but because I am. All the best. God bless. Johnny. Let me be clear. Smartphones have added immeasurably to our lives. There is much good that comes. I don't want to go back to a pre-smartphone world. But be careful, because it can take over your heart. It can take over your eyes and your ears and your mind. It can cause you to live a life that is filled with distraction. It can keep us from looking at the Legos on the beaches of our lives. What's coming up out of my heart? What's the information there? What's it telling me about my heart health or the lack thereof? What is it telling me about my relationships, about my relationship with myself? And then, so a wise parent, long before any smartphone, said, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the trajectory of your life. So this week, what about a smartphone-free, distraction-free hour? What about a smartphone-free, distraction-free afternoon? What about a smartphone-free, distraction-free day? I'll be honest with you. I'm still deciding. But I want to ask you to join me in that decision. And make the decision. Because above all else, guard your heart. For out of it are the issues of life.